What do you think of my green bottoms? My green bottom jeans! The green, yellow bottom jeans? That makes no sense.
Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I've been loving Spy X Family so much that I wanted to make something from the show. So let's get into it. To make this, you'll need 2 skeins of pink yarn, 1 skein of green, and 1 skein of yellow. Then you need some minimal amounts of white and black. This is all in 2.5mm milk cotton yarn, but I didn't really use all the skeins for this project. Since I didn't really plan on making a full tutorial about this, I don't have a full list of supplies, but I listed what I can in the pattern I put in the description. Since I don't have the ability to record a closer top-down view like an actual crochet tutorial channel, I'm just gonna do the same thing I did from the mushroom beret video. And then I'm gonna have a kinda written pattern in the description. I said kinda written since this project is just a combination of different tutorials on YouTube and some modifications along the way. So I'll have what patterns I can have on screen, and I'll be crediting the tutorials I use in the video as I go. I'll also be going over the project in itself, but this video isn't purely about how to crochet the design. I'm gonna be talking about how I made it, of course. I'll also be talking about the logistics to get it done, how long it took, and of course what I think of Spy X Family. So the main base of this is a lion tutorial by Odinka Wisandi? I am so sorry, I don't know how to say that. It's Wisanindhi. I'm mainly using it for the body, the head, the arms, the legs, and the mane, so it's a full lion tutorial. Right now, I'm working on the legs. In the reference photos I've been looking at, Chimera has mainly green hooves with yellow bottoms. In the original tutorial I was following, there was only one color on the bottom, which was white, so I had to modify this pattern to create 3 colors of the leg, and that's why I thought it was okay to put the pattern on screen. If you see me juggling 2 colors of yarn at a time, that's because I was using the no cut join transition between colors. I'll also have a video by Club Crochet listed in the pattern. It should be the second type of join that they do. I really want the even line of color, even if it might be a little crooked. I prefer that over the full uneven crochet line. But if you're okay with that, then you don't have to learn how to do it. So you need to make 2 of these legs. One of them you fasten off and the other you keep on the hook. Since you guys probably won't see much of the process anyway, while you see me crocheting, I'll just talk about the show. Spy X Family was introduced to me by my sister. In 2020, she read the manga and just told me the stories since she knew that I didn't really have time to read them till the latest chapter. She's been super excited to see the anime, and I am too. For a lot of things, I'm an anime only since reading static pictures on my laptop reminds me too much of class reading, so I'd rather have the show with subtitles. I already liked all the memes that it spawned back when it was just a manga, but now it's everywhere, and so many people like it, and the memes are also everywhere. My feed is flooded by a lot of Spy X Family fan art and memes, and I'm not really mad about it. Anya is just so cute, and I really like the Japanese VA so much. It's really accurate to what a kid sounds like and not just an adult trying to mimic a kid. The voice acting for the entire Japanese cast is perfect, and some of you know that Shinobu is one of my favorite Demon Slayer characters, and Shinobu's VA is also the VA for Yor. My sister and I actually don't watch anime together since we go on different schedules, but we love Spy X Family so much that we set aside time to watch it together every Sunday. After each episode, we just want to skip to the next week to watch some more. I'm just excited to see where the show goes and even happier to know that it's getting a continuation in October. Okay, so enough rambling about Spy X Family. Now on to the body. To make it, you need both legs and you need to connect them through a series of single crochet to make something like a bridge between the legs. I didn't really know that the camera was set too low to see my progress, but I would recommend you look at the original video to see how this is done. Just to reiterate, I'm only placing instructions on screen when I've made or modified the design. I didn't really change anything about the body, so I'm leaving it out of my video. Check the pattern in the description for all the videos and links. You're basically gonna use all pink for this and then just connect the legs. It's gonna look like you're making pants for a big portion of it, but as it grows, it's gonna look more like a body. I knew that this design isn't gonna be 100% accurate to the show since I didn't really make one that was able to sit down or have the exact proportion of body shape and head size, but I just wanted to make something close enough that's recognizable. I admittedly also don't have the skills to make a pattern by myself. That's why I resort to using a combination of other people's patterns to bring my own ideas to life, like what I did for the mushroom beret. Making the Chimera was a super impulse decision on my part actually. I really wanted to crochet something again and I didn't really feel inspired by anything else. Since I didn't really have enough yarn to make something I'd want to make, but I had enough scraps of a lot of different colors that I can't justify buying more yarn to finish the project where I ran out. So this is made from random colors of yarn that I collected. I had 2 skeins of pink left over from making projects for my sister since her favorite color is pink, and it's a reliable color for me to make her stuff. Then a slightly used but still pretty usable pale yellow skein, which I bought since I was wondering why it was a full 20 pesos cheaper than the other colors, so I bought 2. My problem is that I don't really use the color yellow that much, and I don't have the accompanying colors to make something out of that yellow, like red or orange. The green is actually part of the first batch of yarn I've ever bought. I really like the color, and though it looked a little bit different from the product photos, I already used it for making a small axolotl plushie, so I already used a fourth of the yarn. The great thing about crocheted plushies is that they take less yarn than you'd think since they're stuffed, but I knew that I still had enough yarn to finish all the projects. For the arms, it's actually simpler than the original pattern, since it's going to be a solid pink color since Chimera's arms look different from the legs. It's basically just one long tube, starting with the magic ring with 10 single crochets, and you just keep going in a circle until you reach 20 rows. A little reminder for this one, you need to stuff as you go. Don't wait until the end to stuff the arms since it's going to be really narrow and hard to get stuffing until the bottom. Then you want to fold it in half and single crochet the top together. So it's basically just going to look like a hot dog with a chisel shaped end. You make 2 of those and leave long tails to sew them onto the body later. When people find out that I crochet, there are some usual questions they ask me. Questions like, is it hard to learn? How long does a project take you? Isn't it distracting? Since I do sometimes crochet in class when watching videos or talking with friends. I'll answer it in order, then I'll talk about the other questions later. Number 1, is it hard to learn? Well, I think there is a learning curve to it, but I think it's manageable. It took me a lot of tries to learn when I first started. I started by making a super simple ball since I knew that I needed to start with simple shapes before moving on to more complex ones. It also helps you learn all the basic steps of amigurumi like the single crochet, increase, and decrease. Since the ball is also supposed to be a sphere and symmetrical, it also trains you to keep your yarn tension consistent since you know what a ball looks like. It took me a good hour to learn how to properly make a magic ring, and I spent like 3 to 4 hours trying to make a ball. And at the end, it looked like an egg since I didn't really pay attention to the row count. I made 2 more after that, and when I was done with the shape, it's not great. I unravel it instead of completing it since it's a waste of yarn. It's something that you really need to work on if you want to get better, but it's also something you need to learn from experience. If you're practicing, I would actually suggest unraveling it instead of fastening it off until you're happy with it because it's going to be just using up yarn on really ugly designs. So now we work on the head. This is basically just a giant ball, so very related to what I talked about previously. It's going to be a solid pink color since we're going to sew on the details later. This is something I didn't change, so please look at the original video for that. In terms of stuffing this one, I suggest waiting until you're starting to close it during the decreases since you want to use the stuffing to create that more round shape. And since it's a bowl shape until you start to close it, the stuffing is gonna fall out when the decreases aren't there. Now for the second question I usually get when crocheting, how long does it usually take to finish a project? I always say that it depends on what you're doing and how much time in the day you're putting into it, the complexity of the design, and the size of the yarn. For context, I made this entire plushie in about a week, giving about 2 hours a day. I'm not completely sure, but this is something I knew that I could finish in 2 to 3 days if I really put the time into it. But you know, I have to balance my student life with it too. When I'm making clothes, like you can see in a few of my vlogs, it can really fluctuate based on yarn size and the size of the garment. I use 3 different sizes of yarn when I'm making clothes. There's fine cotton that's about 1.5 to 2 millimeters if you do a double pull. Then the milk cotton, the one I'm using here, that hovers around 2.5 millimeters. And there's the larger milk cotton that's about 3 millimeters. It's gonna take you more stitches to make the same length from fine cotton as the large milk cotton. Using larger yarn does lead to larger final products if you follow the instructions directly, but this also means less stitches total if you have a more flexible pattern that allows you to change it up depending on what you need, which happens a lot more for clothing. This can also depend on what you want the final product to look like. Sometimes you want a chunky look and sometimes you want more intricate patterns to be seen, so you use thinner yarn. For the mane, imagine you're just making a giant circle that you're gonna put around the face. The one on Chimera is green. It's actually a bit different compared to the other parts since it's the only one made from a chain and not made in the round. It does become a circle later on to make that ring going around the face. To make it into a continuous pattern, the mane is actually made from loops of chains going around a circle base. You make your chains and secure them to the next stitch. After you're done with it, it might look a little weird and twisted, but it can easily be unraveled. That's just because of the tension of the yarn and being held in place in a circle. While I'm making that, I'll try to answer the third question that people ask me, which is how do I find the time to do it? I don't know if you guys know, but I'm a very fidgety person and I'm also a kinesthetic learner, so I like doing something with my hands while I'm doing something else. So most of my crocheting time happens in lectures when I don't have to take notes, when I'm watching videos, or when I'm talking to friends. This isn't that distracting for me since it's actually more distracting for me to have my hands going everywhere looking for something to do or play with. When I'm able to do something, it helps me concentrate more on other things, especially with what I hear since it's the only sense that's unoccupied when I'm crocheting. I've crocheted in a few of my classes before and I didn't really see any lowering of quality, so I thought it was okay for me to be doing it in class. But it really depends on the person doing it. Don't crochet in class just because I told you. Moving on to the other parts, I'm not using the eyes and mouth that came with the design since the original pattern uses safety eyes and Chimera doesn't really look like that. It kinda has this no thoughts head empty look that you can't get with just plain black safety eyes. So I saw this expandable oval pattern by Louise Loops and I used that to make the eyes and the mouth. For the mouth, which was the first one I made, I followed the pattern until row 3 using plain white yarn. Then I used the same pattern for the eyes. But this time I only make it until row 2 of the pattern so it's smaller. Then I make another one. With the testing and measuring it across the face, I thought these two sizes weren't fully accurate, but they got the point across. Now I need to sew on the details using black yarn, so I take my darning needle, which is a needle with a blunt tip, and thread my yarn through it, then poking the needle from the back to the front, then pushing the yarn back in at the end point of the line. The thing about very rough sewing like this is that you can only work in straight lines since the yarn always lays straight, so you really need to think about how you want to form your shape. For the eye, since the entire thing is supposed to be a circle, I start with a line in the middle to show the highest part of the oval, then making shorter and shorter lines beside it, to create something that looks kinda like an oval but not exactly. It's fine if it's not perfect since it's supposed to be a handmade thing anyway. I would suggest cutting the black yarn a bit shorter than I did, but still have enough to tie the two ends of the black yarn together. By two ends, I mean the end that you cut and the end that's attached to the needle. For the mouth, I wanted to have a more defined shape for the nose, so I started with making an upside down triangle at the start. It's a lot easier to do this to create a cleaner shape, but it only works on shapes with straight edges. Then you use the same back and forth sewing to fill the nose shape in. Then starting the yarn from the bottom tip of the triangle, you go outward creating the lines for the mouth, which is supposed to be pointing down. Then you cut your yarn and tie them off like the eyes. Chimera has a green snake tail. I scoured the internet looking for good snake patterns that were in scale of what I wanted and I only found one. It looked great. The problem was, the pattern was in French. The entire video was in French. It's by Le Crochet de Plume. And I looked through the comment section and their website to look for an English pattern and I couldn't find it. My saving grace was the written pattern they had at the end. Since I couldn't find any other designs that I liked, I had to figure this pattern out and write it down in English crochet terms, which I have on screen and in the pattern document. You're also gonna need small safety eyes for this, by the way. Just a little reminder that I only translated the pattern until where I needed it to be, so it's not a full translation. And of course, the snake is going to be green. I thought it would be a good idea to talk about how I go about translating crochet patterns. A little background, I really wanted to make an axolotl crochet pattern about a year ago. The thing is, that pattern was in German, but people in the comments were linking to a website that had the equivalent English terms for the German crochet terms. So I just had to go through the pattern in the video, look for the translation, and then go do it. Sooner or later, I got the pattern through a combination of translations and watching the video. Now when I saw this, I just looked for another site that would translate the French crochet terms in shorthand into English and I just figured it out from there. The entire thing took a longer time than usual since I would have to translate each line of the pattern as I went and type it up for the pattern document. There's actually a part in the tail where I choose to stop stuffing so that I could post the tail more than when it's completely stuffed and I won't be able to fold the tail around to the front. Next would be the wings. I was supposed to use a different pattern based on a video I found on YouTube, but then I realized that the video was only a video tutorial for a certain type of stitch in a paid pattern, so I decided on using the wings from the dragon video by Anya. This is gonna be in green. The usual pattern actually uses two colors, one for the main wing and one for the lining of it, but since Chimera's wings are super simple, I didn't even cut the yarn and just continued with the regular pattern with the same green color. It's actually made by creating a circle, folding it in half, single crocheting around the edge to seal it, and creating the points and the lining. I'm more familiar with this pattern actually since I've made the original dragon pattern before. I honestly wanted the wings to be a bit bigger so it's seen more from the front, but I'm okay with the look since it gives a cuter vibe to the overall plush, and the wider wings would have made the back a little awkward with the wings and tail being so close together. Now we can sew most of the plushie together. For the main parts of the body, I use the sewing portion of the original line tutorial. The first part is to sew the head to the body, and that's just done by getting the long end you left from the head and using the darning needle to sew it to the neck by going through the outside of the neck, through the inside of the head, then repeating all the way around. Then when you're done, you use the needle to go through a random part of the plushie, pull the yarn through, and put the excess yarn back in the body. Next would be the facial features. I start with the mouth, this is going to be the center of the face. I left most of my face parts with all 3 strands of yarn hanging out, and I make sure to trim the black yarn before I sew them all on, leaving a long tail of white for sewing. I tuck all the other yarn ends under the piece, then I do a similar technique to what I did for the neck but now on a flat surface. I take the long tail and start by poking through the plushie, pushing it under the edge of the mouthpiece and going back into the plushie. I find that this is the best way to keep the edges of the facial features intact since the edges don't curl away from the body when it's done. Then, after all that's done, you poke the string back into the white part and do the same cut and tuck in thing we did for the neck. You basically do the same thing for the eyes, they're just smaller. I also use my stitch markers as a way to check the placement for the eyes. Then same technique to stitch all the way around the face. Since this would have more yarn because you need to make the solid pupil rather than just the mouth, this actually has a puffy quality to it, making the plushie a bit bug-eyed. Next would be adding the little hot dog arms. So you place the flat end against the neck of the plushie and take the long end and go through the body and exit the opposite side of the arm. Then flip the arm up and start sewing underneath. This makes sure that there are minimal stitches visible from the top. Then you just go back and forth through the arm and the body, and then you flip the plushie over and you do it on the other side. Now we move on to the only fully original thing on this plushie, which is the horns. At this point, I already had a set of horns made, but when I started sewing the head and in relation to the mane, the horns had a really wide base and it didn't really match the scale of the head. So I went through a few versions of the horns off camera so that it was still tall enough but had a narrower base that would fit the scale more. The footage you're seeing on screen was the final version. Since I wanted more of a point, I used the chain method of getting a magic ring rather than the usual way on your hands. You make a slip stitch, chain 2, then start the stitches from the first chain you made. So basically on the opposite side of the hook. Now back to sewing. Since these are also wide, I stuff them as I'm sewing them into the head. It might seem a bit complicated to sew the horn since they're a 3D shape, but think of it like you're sewing on the eyes. You take it from the outside of the horn, through the plushie, and out through the inside of the horn. Stuffing it gives it shape, but don't stuff too much since it would round off the points of the horns. I really suggest having the mane on but not sewn for this so you can estimate how the face is gonna look like once it's finished. Now, we actually go to the mane. Since it's actually on the plushie, you just do the same technique but the other way around. So instead of going through the plushie, then out from inside of the piece, you poke your needle through the mane first, then out from under the plushie, then back into the mane. I prefer doing it like this so I can actually be sure that it went through all the stitches of the mane, and so that it's a nicer fusion to the head. Don't be afraid to adjust the mane as you go. If your sewing is pushing it forward or back, you can always sew it into place where you want it to go. Just make sure that the yarn doesn't get stuck in the loops of the mane. The last part is just adding the wings and tail. The wings are attached the same way I add the arms, with just a few more stitches for security, since you're only attaching them from the end. You need to make sure that it's secure from both the top and bottom. The tail is sewn on like you would the eyes and the horns, but the most important part is the placement of the eyes. Not really Chimera's eyes, but the snake's eyes. Look at the snake and make sure that when you look at Chimera from the front, you can curl the snake around and the snake looks like it's upright. So let me just finish this up and the plushie is basically done. I hope you guys really like this plushie. I just wanted to make it for myself, but I thought I should also share this too since quite a few of you really like my crocheting and anime themed crafts. What do you guys think of the plushie? Are there any anime crafts you'd want me to try? Leave them in the comments below. If you found this video interesting, hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this from me, then hit the subscribe button and the bell to know when a new video is out. I try to upload every week, Monday nights at 8. I guess that's all for this video. Bye guys!